I say thank heavens for the NES because that's the first system I owned as a child. It was also the first one that introduced me to the world of action-adventure games like The Legend of Zelda, and turn-based RPGs like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. But in 1990, one game combined the Zelda style and the Final Fantasy style into a single formula. The result was the magic of Scheherazade, which was developed and published by Culture Brain. And they're probably most well known for the Baseball Simulator 1000 series, which I absolutely loved. But this one's a whole different ballgame. Pardon the pun, of course. Now there's a lot one could say about this game, but the thing that jumps out to me most right away is that it's probably among the most creative hybrid games ever. And I'll be happy to explain why, but before I get into that, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more retro gaming content. The Magic of Scheherazade is an action-adventure title where you travel through screens in an overhead world, where you find new passages, collect new items, and use swords, rods, and hammers to vanquish enemies. It's not quite as open-ended as The Legend of Zelda though, because the destinations you're trying to reach are a lot clearer in this one. You learn spells throughout the game by hitting specific levels, and these spells can be assigned to the A button through a sub-menu. You can keep swapping between them in this way, and you'll have to do this quite a bit to get through all of the challenges. The factor that makes this title completely different from Zelda is that it contains many aspects of an RPG as well. The most obvious one is that you actually gain experience points from killing enemies and gain levels. New levels yield higher HP for health and MP for magic spells, and you gradually grow more powerful. But the Magic of Scheherazade also features another characteristic of RPGs, turn-based encounters. These transpire at various points throughout the game, but I couldn't really figure out the rhyme or reason behind when you get them. The game just seems designed in a way to throw them in every so often when you transition between screens. You can recruit various generic characters throughout the game to assist you in these battles, and you can even take advantage of arranging them in different ways through formations that you learn. So if you thought that the Magic of Scheherazade's gameplay was unorthodox, wait until you hear about the story. It all starts when Arabia is attacked by demons, which are summoned by the evil magician Sabaron. Why, you may ask? For his evil desire, that's why. You play as an unnamed descendant of Isfa, a good magician, and it's up to you to rescue Princess Scheherazade and restore peace to the world. From what I gather, the game's plot is loosely based on several Middle Eastern folktales found in a book called 1001 Nights, and you'll notice an Arabian flavor to it right away. And if that wasn't original enough, there's also time travel, so you're sent back and forth through the past, present, and future as part of the storyline. Since this game came out in North America a full 3 years after it was released in Japan, the graphics look a bit dated even by NES standards. But the interface was simple to understand, and the game's Arabian flavor made it something fresh and new. Some of the bosses were huge, and even though it isn't exactly like facing bosses with huge sprites from some SNES games, the development team creatively made some of these baddies look a lot more intimidating than they could have been otherwise. This soundtrack was developed by a team of 2 composers, and I actually think it's extremely good for an NES title. Unlike the many games for the system that only had a handful of songs, this one has 31, so that alone is pretty darn impressive for the time. So yeah, for the standards of the era, I think the tunes are great. They definitely stick in my head, and I really got a huge rush of nostalgia hearing them after so many years. If you love adventure and RPG games from this time, I think you'll know what to expect and you'll really enjoy it. Even though the sound doesn't scream Arabian flavor or anything like that, I don't think anyone can hold that against it because that probably would have been next to impossible to pull off on the NES. I really think you'll enjoy this one if NES cheesiness is your thing too, especially because it has all sorts of odd translation choices that still crack me up today. Select the sword or the magic with the start button, and then there's where are you from? No one can enter here. And of course, a wise man will appear in a desert shrine 500 years later. There's plenty more where these came from too, but suffice it to say, English probably wasn't the first language of the head translator. Believe it or not, there's even a class system. At the beginning of the game, you select between fighter, saint, and magician. The Saint has the weakest attack power, but has immunity from damage from traps on the ground. The Fighter has the best close-range melee attacks, and the Magician has the best long-range rod attacks. You can change between them at certain points in the game, and this choice isn't really make or break, but it does add yet another dimension to the gameplay. In total, there's 5 chapters with a major boss to fight at the end of each of them. To make it to the boss of each chapter, you'll need to speak to NPCs in towns, gain information, and make your way through dangerous foes and dungeons. There are even underwater areas to get through, and mermaids to talk to. It's like this game has everything. It's a little more linear than games like Crystallis and The Legend of Zelda, and I actually think that fact makes it hold up pretty well. It doesn't make you feel like you're forced into using a guide for direction, so it stands out a little from some of the other open-ended NES games of the period. Still, there's just a lot of mechanics at play here. This causes the magic of Scheherazade to have something of an identity crisis at times, but it's interesting and unique enough for me to forgive that part of it. I think at times it tried to do a little too much, especially by including both action-oriented and turn-based combat, and by introducing time travel mechanics in a story that probably would have succeeded without it. Still, the game has a certain charm and distinctiveness that virtually no other game has, and the full story will give you about 15 hours of fun. So if you like games like Star Tropics, Willow, Crystallis, The Legend of Zelda, and Final Fantasy, I think you'll really like the magic of Scheherazade. It's a title that completely flies under the radar because it never approached the popularity of those other games, but in my mind it's a true underrated gem on the NES. But now I want to hear from you. Do you have any fun memories of the magic of Scheherazade? And how do you think it compares to other action-adventure and RPG games on the NES? Let me know in a comment below. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell below for more retro gaming content. I also want to give a big shout out to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members, and if you want early access to the videos I produce and other perks like they have, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon patron or via the YouTube Join feature.